Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. I've met many people during my career, and have spent many hours on stage on and off with these musicians talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you.
And good morning, or good afternoon, or good night, whenever you're watching this. This is Bob Ringwald doing a reverse interview. Dan Zeilinger has done how many interviews now, Dan?
About 60 now.
60 interviews with musicians. The idea to have someone interview Dan. So I decided to do that. I volunteered. So good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Bob. How are you today?
I am doing fine, and I hope you are. And let's get started here with the question that you usually ask people is, where were you born?
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska.
And how long did you live there?
About 5 years before I moved. Actually, maybe 4.5.
Moved to where?
Adana, Turkey. My father was a contractor with the armed forces. And because I was born premature with double pneumonia and asthma, and because of all my medical bills, he had to find something that paid well. So he was a contractor for the armed forces, and we moved to Adana.
That must have been neat. How long were you there?
I was in Adana for 2 years, and then we moved to Ankara, or Ankara as they would say it, for another 2 years. And then we moved to Istanbul, Turkey, for another 2 years. So I was there up until I was about 9.5.
So is your memories of that area pretty good?
Yeah. My father was an avid photographer, and so for the rest of my life, so we watched slideshows every time anybody came over to the house. It keeps your memories kind of fresh.
Were they interesting or boring?
Oh no, it was interesting. The culture is so different, and the people we got to meet. For example, when we lived in Istanbul, we lived in a apartment building that was full of embassy officials and airline executives and people from other countries. So we had a real variety of international friends.
And so you have pretty good memories of your time in Turkey, huh?
I loved it, and in fact, I still seek out the food today.
Have you been back there at all?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so where did you move from then?
From then, we decided to come back home. Now, going to and from, of course, back in those days, we're talking about in the early 60s, there were no nonstop flights from Turkey to California. So we were stopping all the way through Europe and through the East Coast, going both ways. When we came back, we stayed for a while with my aunt on Long Island, New York, long enough for me to get enrolled in school there for about a year. And then we moved back to Nebraska. Actually, my dad was from David City. And then from there, we moved to Huntington Beach, California.
Okay, I'm going to presume that's pretty much where you stayed.
Well, kind of. I mean, being nomadic growing up, it was kind of hard to stay anywhere for more than 2 or 3 years. So around Southern California, yeah. I'm now in Anaheim.
And what was your first introduction to music? When did you become aware of it, and when did you think that you had?
Well, my mom, by the way, my father was a German farmer from Omaha, Nebraska, and my mother was a Filipino that they met during the war. It sounds like a typical war baby thing, and it was. And she was a singer, or amateur singer. She sang in the choirs in the Roman Catholic churches we attended. And my father, and because it was 60s, as you well know, everybody had a hi-fi, had a stereo set. And my father was another techno geek, I guess, for his age. And he built his own stereo system while we were in Turkey, which means that we had a huge record collection. By the time I was 10 years old, they had over 2,000 records, LPs.
Did you have to haul those from Turkey to?
We did.
to
They still exist, actually. My younger brother has got possession of them now.
LPs or 78s?
LPs. I had some 78s I had bought later, but the LPs, everything. My mother was, Xavier Cugat and Perez Prado and the Ames brothers, and my father had polkas and had German marches and also he had the early jazz stuff that was mostly in like the Jackie Gleason Presents series, but he was also had stereo action, things that would move between speakers.
The Jackie Gleason series was with the fiddles and so forth, wasn't it?
Well, he did. He kind of did everything. Yeah, he would take credit for other people's talent and have a whole series of Dixieland, a whole series of orchestral stuff.
Okay, so when did you decide you might want to play it?
I never decided. My parents decided for me because I was an asthmatic. I was actually born a month premature with asthma and double pneumonia. And by the time we got back to the States, my doctor told them that it might be a good idea to have me to play a wind instrument to develop my lungs. And my dad handed me a trumpet.
And
I took to it immediately. I went out in the garage when I got home and tried to write a song.
Did you get any lessons or anything, or you just pick it up by yourself?
Well, other than the lessons in the school system, I pretty much picked it up on my own. Of course, marching band or in band. I actually started in seventh grade, seventh and eighth grade.
Started playing trumpet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and where was that? Seventh grade here in California?
Yeah, I was in Huntington Beach.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you played trumpet?
And I played trumpet. That was my first instrument.
And it's in marching bands and so forth.
Concert bands and yeah.
How about jazz?
No jazz yet.
No jazz. So you got into high school, and what did you do?
Yeah, when I went to a place called Marina High School in Huntington Beach, and how I got into multiple instruments is I was over at my aunt's house. This is a different aunt. We were in Westchester, L.A. at her house, and they had a piano in the living room. And all my parents and her, like parents normally did, sat around the dining room after a meal, and they were sitting there talking. And I went out in the living room, and I started plinking off a tune on the piano. And my aunt looks at my dad. I'm hearing this from the next room. My aunt says, "I didn't know Danny played piano." And my father said, "He doesn't, but if you give him any instrument, he'll pick it up within the next 5 minutes." And my memory of that spurred me on to try to learn as many instruments as I could, because it made my father proud. So when I got to high school at Marina, I started playing other instruments also.
Which instruments?
Well, by my senior year, I started out, actually, I went from trumpet to tuba originally when I was a sophomore. But by my senior year, I had gotten my life science credential and my requirements and my math requirements and all that stuff out of the way the summer beforehand. And by my senior year in high school, I loved my band director, and I'm still in contact with him today, a guy named John Mason. He had me playing, in first period, I was playing trombone in beginning band. I was playing flute and French horn in orchestra. I was playing trumpet in the symphonic band, a tuba in the concert band, and drum set in the jazz band, or actually pep band.
Wow. So while you were in high school, did you plan on becoming majoring in music in college, or what?
Yeah, I was so enamored with my director that I wanted to emulate him growing up. I wanted to become an educator. That was my plan as I left high school.
And you went to college?
I went to junior college. My parents, although my dad was the superintendent in charge of buildings and grounds at Loyola Marymount in L.A., and my mom was strictly a housewife at the time. To give you an idea of how stupid I can be, my father's job made it possible that I could have gotten a full ride scholarship from Loyola Marymount. And I didn't like the music program. So instead I went to a junior college. I went to
What
Orange
was
Coast
wrong?
College in Costa Mesa.
What
Which
was wrong with the music? What was wrong with the music program?
It was classically based. There was no jazz program. It was actually centered at the theater, and all of their music was centered to be associated with theater arts. And I was looking for jazz and big bands, and especially things that a high note trumpet player would be good at.
Okay, so you went to,
Orange Coast College in Costa Mesa, because
and
they
you were,
had actually a world or nationally known jazz program at the time.
and you were playing what, all the instruments, or what did you?
I started, well, funny story. I walked into the program, and first thing was a 7 a.m. big band rehearsal on Monday. Can you imagine that? Trying to do a big band in 7 a.m.?
Yep.
And I walked into it, and there was this room full of really great musicians. Now, I was hot stuff in high school, so I brought a chart with me. And I basically got laughed out of the room because I didn't know what I was doing, as far as voicings and all that good stuff. So I started there, and I played mallet percussion in the percussion ensemble. I actually played alto flute in the flute ensemble. I was playing trumpet in the brass choir and tuba. I was playing all my instruments in different outfits. But that's
And
when
how
I
did
sort of got shanghaied into Dixieland, was during those years.
how did you have time to do anything else besides play music
Oh, I
in
didn't,
college?
which is why I never got my credential.
Oh yeah.
I
So so then you say you got shanghaied into jazz.
well, I met
More
a bunch of the guys that are now.
Dixieland, I would say.
Yeah, I was playing lead trumpet, high note trumpet in the big bands, and I was playing all this stuff in all these other bands. And Brian Shaw kind of ended up being one of my better friends and probably my best friend in college. And I would walk by a practice room, and he'd be in there going through jazz tunes. And he said, "You want to see what I'm doing?" I said, "Sure." So I came and sat down, got out my horn, and he started teaching me how to play melodies, jazz melodies, out of the fake book. And he wanted somebody to play duets with, so we were doing classical duets and going through lead sheets with him. And of course Dan Barrett was in that school, and as well as both of the Waltz brothers, and in and out people like Larry Wright, and a lot of those guys went through that program one way or another. And finally one day I was down, went to one of their gigs. We had a little place in Newport Beach called South Coast Plaza and South Coast Village, where Dan and a bunch of the guys were playing a Dixieland gig. And I had my girlfriend with me, and I went out and sat on the lawn to listen to the band. And somebody didn't show up on tuba. I think it might have been Jeff Beaumont or somebody, or Ted DePlant, or somebody was supposed to be playing tuba, and they didn't show up. And Brian looks at me sitting on the lawn and says, "Dan, go back to school and get your tuba." No, I had never improvised bass line in my life. Akubis was on that job, actually, playing reeds. And so that was my introduction, thrown in the deep end with the waist tied around my ankles. And I played the rest of the gig on tuba. It was a mess.
Well, I tell you, you got started with a bunch of fantastic musicians.
I was really spoiled.
Yeah, usually we all start with a bunch of really bad guys and try to struggle ourselves out of it. And you got thrown in the deep end there with a bunch of really good guys. For anyone watching this interview who doesn't know, Brian Shaw is a wonderful trumpet player and has a great recording studio down there. And where is it?
He's in Newport Beach.
Costa Mesa. Huh?
Yeah.
Where? I dropped out for a second. Where did you say his studio
He's
is?
in Newport Beach, right next to Costa Mesa.
Okay. Yeah, I've been there, and that's quite a place. And then, of course, Dan Barrett's a wonderful trumpet and trombone player. How do you like the way he can switch both horns. It's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know it, but he also plays a little bit of tenor sax, or he was at the time.
I haven't heard him play that, but he sure is a good arranger also.
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah. And who'd you say? Walter Brothers?
Waltz, Paul Waltz,
Oh, yeah,
and
Paul.
Randy Waltz, his younger brother.
I don't know Randy, but Paul was up in there in Washington. He subbed with me for a while when I was in L.A.
He's phenomenal. Yeah, known for his sax playing and bass sax playing, but he also played tuba back then, as well as other things. And his brother Randy was a drummer, and I still play with him. He's a piano player, and he plays at Curly's all the time on that gig with me.
So you got thrown in the deep end there, and when did you actually start making money playing?
Well, it's interesting because I sort of, after 2 or 3 years at Orange Coast College, I jumped ship and I went to a little school in Huntington Beach called Golden West College, and played in their big bands. And I was playing both trumpet and tuba at the time still. And the band director there, a guy named Dave Anthony, who is since deceased, gets a letter in the mail saying that Southern Comfort and the National Association of Jazz Educators were throwing a contest to find the best collegiate Dixieland band in the country, for a contest that was going to be sponsored by Southern Comfort, the booze people. That wouldn't happen nowadays, of course. But so here's the booze company throwing a contest for a college band. And he decided, it's because we had Brian Shaw in the band there at Golden West also, and myself, he said, hey, Brian, why don't you put together a band and we'll enter this thing and see what happens. And so Brian put together that band, and he brought Dan in to play trombones, Dan Barrett, and he brought Howard Alden in to play banjo, and he brought in Mark Curry from Disneyland to play clarinet, and Ed Slauson was playing drums at the time, and we entered the contest with that band, and we got them all enrolled at the college and signed up for the classes, which they weren't originally, by the way. And we ended up winning against Eastman and North Texas State and every other university in the country that entered the contest.
So did you travel back there or what happened?
Well, what happened is they had a contest in St. Louis, surprise, surprise, and they brought all the top five, I think it was maybe top three bands, to the National Jazz Association Educators Convention in St. Louis that year, and we kind of had a playoff. And people on the panel, the judges were Mike Vax and Tommy Newsom and Matt Benton, who was a official.
It dropped out for a second. Who'd you say was on the panel?
Oh, Mike Vax and Tommy Newsom of The Tonight Show, and a guy named Matt Benton, who was, I think, one of the higher-ups in the National Association of Jazz Educators. And so we kind of had a playoff at the convention. And at the meantime, Mark Curry, who was our clarinetist, of course, Mark was there. I'm sorry. And Howard Alden got called to play a musical in L.A. He was already performing. So he was playing a musical in L.A. and couldn't make the convention. So we brought in Denny Hardwick on banjo and guitar. Anyway, we ended up winning. This is 1980 that happened.
What did you win?
We won $1,000 apiece.
Whoa.
And a year of touring and travel promoting Southern Comfort booze.
Wow, and you got a case of booze each too?
We got one bottle.
One bottle. How old were you?
We were between. I was 24 or so, but we were in our early 20s and late teens, all of us, somewhere in there.
I see.
But we did all kinds of national television. We went to England and toured England, supporting, promoting Southern Comfort. We were in New York getting ready to go on Good Morning America when President Reagan was shot. And we got bumped because Hinckley took a shot at Reagan. Could you imagine?
Yeah. Wow, what an experience you guys had. And of course, your college year went to pot that year, huh?
Excuse me?
Yeah.
They just said, we'll give you credit for going out for a year and representing the school.
Well, that's amazing. Well, that was quite an experience. So you were 24 or so at that time?
Around there, yeah. Let me see. Yeah,
Well, it's close
right
enough,
around there.
but you weren't playing Dixieland for money yet, or what?
No, not until that moment. And all of a sudden after that, I started making more money on tuba than I ever did on trumpet. So
And so did you play music for a living, or did you go back to teaching?
well, I did a little. I never actually got my credential. So all the teaching I did was actually as a walk-on coach or jazz band expert or those kind of things. So majority of my money was with all the bands I did. I went from that Southern Comfort band after a while, and I was still playing salsa music with the Cuban band out of L.A. on trumpet at the time. And I started getting Dixieland gigs from these guys and other guys who heard me. And so it sort of all just took off from there. From there, I got into the Misbehavin' Jazz Band, which was another band of really great players.
And who was in that band?
That was Brian Shaw and Chuck Anderson on trombone at one of the guys. A variety of clarinet players. Our last trombone player was Westy Westenhofer. Our last reed player was Evan Christopher. Brad Roth on banjo. The leader was the drummer guy named Fred Montgomery. Ragtime piano player Bill Mitchell was playing piano with us in the early days, and the drummer's name was I'm seeing his face in my.
I believe you said it was Fred Montgomery.
Fred Montgomery, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
And so that band started doing festivals, and taking casuals and offshoots of that group. So.
And so you start playing with other bands also, as it usually
Yeah, pick up
happens. If you have any
bands and.
If you have any kind of reputation at all, the word gets around pretty fast. You start getting calls for other bands.
Especially as a tuba player, there aren't a whole lot of tuba players who know the tunes. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, there are always some, but there are a lot more trumpet players and reed players than there are tuba players in areas. So I started working everywhere from San Diego. So I started working with Bill Dendel and all the guys down there. And I would drive down and drive back up again. And
the name of that band was?
South Market Street Jazz Band.
Okay. Did you play? They played the festival in Monterey in 1968. Were you in that band?
No, I never played in the band proper. I was always subbing with different people or breakdown groups. You know, they would get a quartet job or a trio job or a smaller job at a convention. I would get called for those.
And who else did you play with?
Oh, golly. That's an interesting question sort of a shot at all kinds of people. If you were in Los Angeles and needed a tuba player for a while, it became kind of a joke because you couldn't walk into a place that had a tuba player. It wasn't me. One time, Larry Wright, you know Lawrence, don't you?
Yes,
One time he sent me an email saying, I just got my copy of the West Coast Rag, and you're on every page. And it was different bands I was playing or sitting in with or festivals that I was attending. So I also worked at Knott's Berry Farm in a band there called the Berry Stompin' Jazz Band.
Yeah, now who were you with there?
That was Rusty Stiers on trumpet and Brad Roth on banjo, and a guy named George Andrus was the leader and the drummer, and I was playing tuba. It was a quartet. We did that for 7 years, something like that.
How many days a week?
It varied. It went from 3 days to sometimes 6 days a week, depending on the year and the schedule. But we were there fully employed, at least on weekends, for about 6 or 7 years.
Was it like Disney where you had to go in at 9 o'clock or 10 and?
Yeah, we were there for the opening. If they opened the gates at 10, we'd have to be there at 9. If they opened at 9, we'd have to be there at 8. But it was a non-union house, was the difference between Knott's and Disney.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember Ray Templin. Of course, you interviewed Ray.
Yeah.
he called me one time from the band room at Disney. Called me on the phone. He said, "I'm calling you from the happiest place on earth." And I said, "What are you doing in my girlfriend's bedroom?"
Yeah.
One of my better lines.
I liked it.
So I know I don't want to skip over anything that you might want to say as far as what band you played with, but I did want to get to the fact that you somehow got embroiled in Ed, 10th Avenue Band. Ed, what was his last name?
Zimbrick.
Zimbrick,
Well,
right.
on the way there, of course, I played for 6 years with Banjo Mania.
Okay.
Which was Brad Roth and Doug Maddox, and the owner, tenor player Steve Simpson. And I was with them for 6 years.
And where did you guys play? Yeah.
Oh, everywhere. That band was nationally touring. We actually did a tour of Japan, as well as we played at Sacramento like everybody else did, and we were actually on national. We were on Nashville Now. I played at the Grand Ole Opry with them.
That must have been an experience.
It was a blast. I know more about banjos than I ever cared to know.
Yeah. Who else did you play with?
Well, when I was, I got actually Dottie Ashworth recruited me out of Misbehaving Jazz Band to go into the Hot Frogs Jumping Jazz Band. One day at the LAX Jazz Festival, she corners me and she says, "Danny, how would you like to be a member of the Hot Frogs Jumping Jazz Band?" Now, I was pretty new, and I saw the kind of crowds that band used to get. They got a lot bigger crowds than Misbehaving ever did, and we weren't doing as much work as I would have liked to have done with them. So I got that chance, and I took it, and I went to play with the Hot Frogs, which is where I met you, and I met all those guys, Joe and Mike, and at the time I think Jackson was on trombone, Jackson Stock, and Lance McLean was playing banjo.
Yeah.
So from the Hot Frogs, as you know, for a time there, the Hot Frogs and the 10th Avenue were almost the exact band.
Right.
And so from the Hot Frogs is how I ended up in. One time Ed Zimbrick came down and played with the Frogs, and I got recruited into 10th Avenue. So that's how I got there with Ed Zimbrick and the 10th Avenue guys.
I was, of course, had my own band there in Los Angeles, but I kind of was a major sub in the Hot Frogs when Les had other commitments on week. I would fill in on piano, and then when Lance moved back east, I would fill in on banjo.
Yeah.
So I presume you came in while that was going on.
Yeah.
Dave Wright, I think, was in before you, and Jim Mahag played some tuba.
Correct. Mike Mulroy did before that.
Oh no, I didn't. I wasn't there when Mike was there, but
Doug Maddox was playing banjo with them for a while.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, before Lance. So 10th Avenue was quite a story because, in case some of the folks don't know, Ed Zimbrick lived in the San Jose area and was a real estate person. I can't remember the name of the company. It's a major...
Alpha Century 21.
Yes. And at one time he had 400 salesmen working for him. And he had so much money, he didn't know what to do with it. And he wanted to play music. He had been a rock musician, playing rock trombone, probably like Blood, Sweat, and Tears stuff and so.
Yeah, actually, he was doing that in Huntington Beach in the Southern California area, where he met Rosita. And
he was a brilliant person. Strange in some ways, but absolutely brilliant. So he puts the band, or he had a band together. He put the band together, started touring with it, and here he is running his business from God knows where with 400 salesmen, and he's touring all over the world, and he's got the musicians on. A lot of them were on. What do you say when you get paid weekly, no matter whether you work or not?
Well, pretty much, but we worked weekly.
Yeah, that's true. And if you didn't work, you were rehearsing.
He would fly us all up to his house in San Jose, And our drummer was from Vancouver, Canada,
Right.
British Columbia, and our piano player was from San Diego. And he would fly all of us in. If we weren't touring or performing somewhere, we got all flown into San Jose and rehearsed.
And he would also, I think the banjo player at one time was from Phoenix.
Matt
I did
Mooney.
some, yeah, I did some subbing in the band, but I could never keep up with his arrangements. He would write so many arrangements and so complicated and difficult, and there's no way that I could spend 24 hours a day working on his arrangements trying to memorize them. So there's no way I could.
Well, he was so prolific. One of the things I used to say about Ed is you had to be careful what you said around him. For example, we had a guy who came in to play guitar at the end of my stay there, a guy named Al Weeb, who was another Canadian. And he mentioned to Ed that he came out, he used to play psychedelic bands and rock bands and things. And the next day, Ed passes out these charts, of rock and roll tunes. And just because he thought Al Weeb would like it. So if you said something in front of Zembrick, he'd go ahead and turn out a chart.
Well, he'd get on an airplane, and by the time he got to the destination, he'd have a chart written.
Yep. Yeah, he was.
By chart.
And also for a time, he was funding almost, I would say, 75% of the jazz festivals on the West Coast.
That's right.
And not only was he funding them, he was equipping them. I was there when we started going out and buying his younger brother, Bobby. It ended up being our road manager, roadie. And we went out and we bought, he had me do it. He handed me a credit card. He said, Dan, I need to have 6 venues worth of stuff. I need electric pianos, sound systems, drum sets. Here's my card. Go get it.
He, at one time, I did a CD of various bands, one cut from each band as a benefit for the Sacramento Jazz Jubilee up here. Okay, well, Ed gave me $4,000 to produce this CD. Like I said, he was a strange fellow, a genius, and is an amazing person, and he had the band with most of them on salary, touring all over the world. I don't know how long he toured, but must have been a good 6, 7, 8 years. You think?
Oh yeah, and it was really fun because it was just something we would. But when I left the band, we were doing Australia maybe once or twice a year, and we were doing the UK once or twice a year, and all the West Coast festivals. And like I said, if we weren't doing one of those things, we were rehearsing.
Well, I remember doing a festival with them up in Vancouver. I was playing with the Frogs, and like you say, most of the guys in the Hot Frogs were also playing in Ed's band. So we got up, I think, at 2:00 in the morning to get to the LAX, the airport, and to fly up to Vancouver. And then that day, I played the Frogs, and we did a set, and we alternated with 10th Avenue. Well, most of the guys on 10th Avenue, especially Joe Ashworth and Ed, I know, and I can't remember who else, played in both bands. After getting about 2 hours sleep, they did 8 sets that day. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I did that. I did that at about 4 or 5 festivals also. Towards the end, when Mike Silverman wasn't doing well, I actually played 3 different festivals back to back, playing a cornet with the Hot Frogs and tuba with 10th Avenue. And I was doing 8 sets a day.
So were you married at this time?
Yeah, believe it or not, she was around with the kids. I was on the road. Now I waited till my kids were older before I started all this. They were older than, by that I mean they were getting into high school and junior high school at the time when I was doing all this. And that's one of the reasons I left, actually.
Yeah, it must have been tough being away from home so much and trying to raise kids, relying on your wife to do have to do everything.
The story, which is true, I was at home one weekend. For some reason, we had a weekend off, and and the family was sitting around the living room watching TV, and there was no place for me to sit. They had learned they had learned how to live without me there at those times. And literally, I walked out in the living room, and there, the couch was taken up, and the easy chair was taken up, and I sat
You
on the
walked
floor.
in, you walked in, and they said, "Who are you?"
And I realized that it was time. My son was talking about maybe going to Texas with a girlfriend at the time, and my daughter was just getting into high school, and I said, I've got to stay home. When you wake up in
So,
the middle of the night and you don't know if you're home or on the road.
yeah.
And
So,
I'm sure you know what I'm saying, because I wake up and where's the bathroom? In my own mind, you know. So it was I
well,
was he was literally doing we were literally doing 42, 44 flights a year.
I got married very young and started a family very young, and my wife was a homemaker, uh, and stay-at-home mom. So, and I played music for 30 years. So, being a piano player, of course, it was easier to get jobs. It's kind of hard for a single trumpet player to go out and work, but
Yeah.
piano player can usually
How
work.
about a single tuba player?
Yeah, right. So, so I was playing piano 5, 6, 7 nights a week, playing cocktail hours, after hours, regular gigs, and lunch times, every job I could possibly get. And I think I mentioned to you on an interview that if this virus would have come along when I was playing, I would have been SOL because
Yeah.
my income would have been gone completely. And I'm sure this has happened to a lot of the working musicians now, and
Well,
it's just terrible.
during all this time I was also teaching and writing for high schools, um, and drum and bugle corps for that matter.
Were you
So,
making money at it?
oh yeah, I mean that's why I was doing it, and so uh, I would be on
Let's
the road.
say
In fact,
were you making decent money at it as well?
well, what do you decent? No,
Oh, okay.
but I was making it was in addition to. In fact, one summer during all of this nonsense, I was working down in San Diego. I worked at the Wild Animal Park 2 days a week with Bill Dental. I worked at SeaWorld San Diego for 3 days with a group called the Sultans of Dixie. I worked 1 day a week up in Pasadena with Phil Andreen and the Crown City Jazz Band. And so I was working 7 days a week, but I was driving between Pasadena and San Diego to do it. I was living in Huntington Beach at the time.
Well, I mentioned the reason I mentioned that I had gotten married young and raised a family was that we were on the verge of bankruptcy the whole time, so I couldn't afford to take a week off. So I didn't do the traveling you did. I would play around Northern California and San Francisco, but I never did the actual traveling like all over the world like you had a chance to do.
Well,
So
I tell people I lived the life of a millionaire with none of the money.
that's, yes, you live the life of a traveling musician also.
My wife, fortunately, is an RN, and she actually has her master's in nursing, and so she's always made enough to keep us afloat. While I basically everything I ever did in my life was supplemental to our main income.
Well, that really helps, of course. So you were playing with the Hot Frogs and with Ed's band, and then you kind of quit traveling. At least you still play a lot of gigs, but
Actually, after I came off of Ed's band, I stopped playing for about 8 years, gigging wise. I solely taught and wrote for marching bands and things. I didn't get started playing again until Westy Westenhofer got on my butt and told me I needed to be playing, and he started throwing gigs at me.
all right.
So,
So you quit for 8 years and got back into it. What have you been doing since then?
well, since then, actually, I've been still teaching. I had all this teaching going on. I was at Kennedy High School in Anaheim Hills for 12 years as as an assistant. And from there, I went to Segerstrom High School in Santa Ana. I taught there up until 2 weeks ago. I thought teaching marching band over the internet was kind of something I didn't want to do. And along with that, I've been playing every Friday night at Curly's Cafe in Signal Hill, California, and taking whatever pickup gigs I get. So there's actually still a bit of jazz in Southern California before March. To have, with the conventions and everything that goes on around here, you can stay pretty busy.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching this interview, meaning before March means before virus, and that killed the music industry for us.
Well, not only that, it means I couldn't teach either.
When I used to, once in a while, when my daughter lived down there, I would go down to Curly's on Wednesdays and sit in with Katie
Jerry Rothschild.
CJ.
Oh, yeah.
No, nobody. It was just CJ and Katie at the time. Just the two of them. I used to go down and sit in with them. Of course, my daughter's moved out of LA, so I have no reason to go down there anymore.
CJ's been the godsend to me, actually.
Yeah, how's that?
Oh, well, Westy was playing that gig for him for a while, and Westy decided that he had some other things to do, and he's the one who turned that gig over to me. And CJ has been wonderful. Of course, CJ is a tuba player, and primarily, and he had me go down and play with them on Fridays, and he stepped to cornet. I enjoyed it so much, and a lot of the fans knew me from my past bands, that we just kept that configuration. And so that's a fun band, and he is, the other thing he does is he comes up with songs I've never played before, and that's a rare thing for me.
Yeah, he did that when I'd sit in with Katie, and they were doing a lot of things that I had never played before. Who all's in that band? This is, I guess you got to say it's BV, Before Virus. I presume the gig is not going on right now.
Well, what he likes to do is he has a core stable of people, which I am one, and then there are a lot of subs that come in and out and stuff, and that's also fun. But primarily, he's playing cornet now. Mike Olson, you probably know Mike.
No.
George Olson's son. Plays reeds. The young man, we have a couple of different banjo players that play with that group. When we can get her, they like to use Katie, of course, but she was busy at Disneyland, PV, and young
BV.
man, yeah,
BV,
PV,
P.
Well, that's pre, right?
Pre. Okay.
And so we had a young man named Zane Johnson, who I just posted his senior recital, who plays banjo and guitar. And Craig Colby is a banjo player who sits in with us every so often. But a lot of different trombone players and reed players and just whoever needs to be there. When I'm not there, Charlie Warren will play tuba for me, or David Silverman. But that's really rare now that I'm not at school anymore. So so the core people, and then piano, we've got Robbie Rhodes a lot of the time, or Randy Waltz. There's a young man named Roberto Pasqualiello who comes in as a wonderful voice, sings and plays piano. So that's Curly's Cafe in Signal Hill, California, if we ever get out of this thing and get to do that gig again.
I hope it comes around again, and you guys have it. Robbie Rhodes, you mentioned, what a wonderful talent he is on piano.
Oh, and a great guy.
Learned to play by watching piano. He'd watch the keys on the piano rolls. That's the way he learned to play.
Well, he still works with piano rolls, actually.
I know you talked about him on a previous interview I heard, and that's something that I wanted to mention. I didn't know if you're familiar with it. He did a couple of things. One of the things he did was take a piano roll of Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, took Scotch tape, covered up certain holes, took a razor blade, made other holes in the paper. It was a the old-fashioned paper roll, and turned it into the Cuban maple leaf rag. It was a maple leaf rag with a Cuban beat. It was really funny. Beautiful job of it. It was really funny.
He's
The
got
other
an,
thing, hmm?
I was just to say, he's got an incredible knowledge of early music, early jazz.
The other thing he did was he took a Earl Father Hines piano roll and covered up certain holes, certain places. So he played a duet with Hines. He's playing the left hand, and he's got Earl Hines playing the right hand because he had covered up the holes in the left hand. And then they switch, and then he's playing the right hand, and Hines is playing the left hand. Then they're trading fours.
That's great.
And then, I think I went to a concert at the Old Town Music Hall in El Segundo, and afterwards we went next door to I don't know what it was, a coffee house or something. So he stands up and he tells the whole audience, he goes through this big thing about how that he took a piano roll and unrolled it and had me feel of it, and then I was able to, from that, sit down and play the piano, play it note for note.
That's funny.
Yeah, he had a sense of humor, I would say, but
Oh,
wonderful talent.
yeah, he still does. I mean, one time he walked into me and he said, Daniel, have you ever heard peacocks squawk? I said, well, sure. He says, I sampled one, and I found out it's the greatest sound to do Lithuanian tunes with.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, I don't want to miss anything that you might want to talk about, but I do want to ask you a question. In all your travels and all the bands you played, can you think of any strange things that have happened to you, especially between the audience and the band, or things with the band, within the band, so forth?
Well, I don't know about strange. I was playing in the Palm Springs for a festival, and I'm very, as you guys can tell, I'm an outgoing guy. And I always make it a chance when I'm at a venue early to talk to the audience and say hi and recognize the people that I know out there and things. And we were at Palm Springs, and this couple comes up to me, says, Dan, can we talk to you for a minute? I said, sure. He said, well, we've done quite well in life, and all our kids are all grown up, and they're doing well. And we were just wondering, could you use any money?
And what did you say?
I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, we just watched you over the festivals over the years, and we just think you're a great guy and really talented, and we're just wondering, if you. I said, well, I'd like to have a recording studio for my house. They said, well, why don't you tell us what it would take, and just let us know. Anyway, they ended up just handing me $2,000. We're talking about in the 80s.
Wow.
And I said, well, I don't want this if you're expecting me to pay this back. They said, no. It's just consider it a gift. And so that's pretty strange.
Yeah, I would say so. What else?
Well, I got kind of as generous of an offer once from Larry Wright. When the sequencers, the samplers first came out, the keyboard samplers. He had one that he wasn't using, and he called me up and said, Dan, I've got a sampler. Do you want it? I said, well, I can't afford to buy any of that stuff. He goes, no, if you can use it, I'll just give it to you. So it was a $2,400 sampler.
All right.
I've been so fortunate. It's like starting out with the Dixieland bands that I got into. I started at the top of the mountain, which is, it's kind of a hard place to start.
You sure did.
And people have been generous and kind to me when I was with Ed Zimbrick. Oh, here's a story for you. We were doing a cruise that started in Savona, Italy. So the band flies into Italy. Well, let me back up. I'm sorry. I go to L.A. and I'm playing a sousaphone, and it is wrapped in a comforter and then zipped up in a denim gig bag that Ralph Reynolds made for me.
Now, sousaphone, for the folks that might not know, kind of explain what this is.
It's a tuba that wraps around you, basically.
And I presume you know why they had the.
Well, John Philip Sousa. The horn was designed for John Philip Sousa in many different iterations, and it ended up being there. So,
I heard it was designed for the cavalry so that they could ride the horses and play the.
well, that was the rain catcher, the tuba that wrapped around you that had the bell facing straight up.
Okay.
That was called a rain catcher, and that's what Sousa used at the beginning. And then somebody decided to tilt the bell forward, and that became a sousaphone.
So you wrap this thing up to ship, huh?
Well, I wrapped it up in a canvas gig bag with a blanket. I went to LAX, and I set it down on the United luggage claim, and the girl looks at me, she goes, "Where's your hard case?" So I don't have a hard case with this. I've flown it all over the country like this. It's not a problem.
Yeah, good luck.
And she looks up at me and says, "You haven't been to Italy, have you?" Well, when we got to Italy, that's why I had to back up. When we got to Italy, the horn was mangled. And Ed Zembrick looks at me, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. When we get to the town, we'll just throw it overboard and buy you another horn." Well, there's not a whole lot of music stores with sousaphones open on Sunday afternoon in Savona, Italy. So I ended up taking you're frozen here for a minute.
Hey, you ended up taking what?
I ended up taking a screwdriver and some tools I got from the mechanics on the ship and straightening it out enough so I could play it for that trip. And so that was kind of an interesting thing that happened on tour.
Yeah.
I actually had to repair my horn before I could play it. But
How about any funny gags between you and other band
oh
members?
God, well, because I was in a band with Westy, you can just imagine what that might have been like.
Westy Wessenhofer, wonderful musician from San Diego who has since passed.
Yeah, he would actually have me write. We would write comedy material on the backs of barf bags when we were flying from venue to venue, and all kinds of things we ended up writing together. But I don't know if you've heard Westy do the Fat Man's Lament.
I'm not sure.
Well, he did it to the tune of "I Wonder Why." We smell pizzas from a mile away. Our leftovers never last a day. Look how our pants always fit this way. I wonder why. Anyway, I wrote that for him, and he uses it all the time. There was another incident where I was actually going to England with the Syncopators, Howard Alden and Dan Barrett and those guys. And on the way over, they were musing back and forth about they were going to write the ultimate Irish tune, and so they were sitting and talking about what that I would have to include. He says, "Well, you'd have to talk about their mother, you'd have to talk about Ireland being green, that's sort of where it stopped."
What happened to the booze?
So I took it over, and I actually wrote a tune just for the kicks of it. And Westy ended up doing it as part of his act, which was, "Does your mother know you're Irish? Was your father Irish too? Did your mother know your father? Did she sing this song to you?" And it goes on. So I wrote that actually as an inspiration from Howard and Dan, and then Westy used it in his act.
Well, let me just tell you a couple, at least one thing I can think of right now that happened to me. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I was working at Shakey's in Burbank. And I was fairly near the back door. And of course, as you do, you put what they call a kitty or a tip jar or something out and put a 1 or a 5 or something in it to show everybody that's what they're supposed to give you some money if they make a tip and so forth. So I had a guy grab that and run out the back door one night. And a bunch of guys chased him out the door and went after him and never found him. So he got my tips for the night.
Oh, my gosh.
Another time in my very early years playing in Sacramento at a place called Capone's Chicago Tea Room, there was a guy who used to come in, we used to call him Scotty. And I think because he was a Scotchman. So this one time he puts in a $1 bill and takes out 50 cents.
I got one you might get a kick out of. I actually, because my mother's Filipino, my dad is German, I come out looking sort of like a Mexican Hawaiian, and I'm a fairly large fellow, and I was playing at a jazz festival, I think in Portland or in Oregon, and I get done with the set and I come off stage and there's a lady there waiting for me, And she says, "Your last name's Zeilinger, right?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Oh, you must be related to the Nebraska Zeilingers." I said, "Why do you say that?" She says, "Because you have no neck."
Oh, really?
So I said, "Well, that's true. I didn't realize that was a family trait."
And were you related to them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, there's been a whole plethora of distant family relatives now from Nebraska that have found me on Facebook. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. They all knew, of course, somehow related to my grandparents and before that. It's not a very usual name, so.
Well, a story that we mentioned when you interviewed me, and for those of you who might not hear that interview, I want to mention it because I thought it was pretty funny. We're flying to someplace in Montana or someplace. Remember the story?
Yeah.
I know I was on the plane, and tell the folks about that story.
You're talking about the one with Westy and I? And
yeah. And
so we're sitting on, in order to get to
it's a little tiny plane.
Right, in order to get to the festival I think it was in Helena, Montana, you had to do a stopover in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then they'd put you on a little 16-passenger puddle jumper into Helena. And so Westy and I got on, and of course Westy Westenhofer was also a man of girth. And so we were sitting there in this seat, and I had the window, and he had the aisle. Oh, no, I think it was vice. It doesn't matter, but... and who comes down the aisle towards us as we're boarding? But a piano player named Big Tiny Little. And he is a large person also, or he was. And so he walks up to Westy and I, and Westy and I have a seat between us with about 4 inches between bodies. And Big Tiny looks at his ticket, and he looks at us, and he looks at his ticket, and Westy and I both shake our head no, and he shakes his head yes. So Westy gets up and into the aisle, and Tiny comes into the center seat, and Westy sits back down again. And Westy's line about that was when we got off, we had to rock back and forth to break the seal between us. But the other thing that happened is because it was a scream. It was very funny. And
Well,
so
somebody that I know took a picture. I mean,
Right.
I can't remember who it was, but that would be a great picture to post on your website.
Yeah, I don't have the picture, but the picture he's talking about is we were all, well, heavy guys tend to be comedians type of things anyway, and so we put our tray tables down. Of course, they all sat at like a 35-degree angle because we couldn't get them down all the way. And a friend of Bob's, I don't even remember who it was either, stood up and took a picture across the aisle of us with the three of us together. I think we all had our thumbs up, and the tray tables were, of course, hitting our chin. And we actually used that as a source of... Westy used to, when we got there, Westy got on the mic and he told them the story about what happened. He said, now that really wasn't the annoying thing. The annoying thing was, in order to get from Salt Lake to Helena, Montana, the plane had to go and had to do curlicues because the weight was all on one side.
Yeah, they had to take all the passengers over to the other side to even it out. For those of you, again, who might not be familiar, Tiny was Big Tiny Little, who was on the Lawrence Welk show, the ragtime player, before Joanne Castle came on. And he was a wonderful guy. He would never, ever, let's see, what's the word? He would never, ever never, ever not, that's a strange thing to say, come over and say hi to me, no matter where we were. I, of course, being blind, couldn't see a guy and couldn't go wave at him or talk to him or something. He would come to me always and say hi, and just what a great guy he was.
Oh, yeah, and because of that meeting, then he actually did a few festivals with Zimbrick and cruises with Ed. And he and I became really good friends. I ended up playing on his last 2 CD recordings with him. The Best of Honky Tonk Volumes 1 and 2. And on Volume 1, it's Bill Dendle on banjo, and Volume 2, it's Pat Deneen on banjo. But I was so fortunate to have met him. What a wonderful guy.
Yes, he was. Well, I tell you what, I don't know, what have we missed before we get off of here?
No, I think, other than the story of how when I met you, of course, when we met was different. There's all kinds of things we haven't talked about, but
Well,
that's pretty much, that's pretty much people. I don't know. You think that's enough for the people who are asking you to interview me?
I don't know. It's up to you. It's your interview.
Yeah, the only thing I have to plug is this channel, which is Trad Jazz Today. I haven't decided how and when I'm going to drop this interview yet on the air, but I also want to plug Daniel E. Zeilinger on YouTube, which is a collection of the music I've played over the years. So I have everything on there from part of Big Tiny Little's album to the 10th Avenue to the Golden West Jazz Band. I have a little bit of everything I've done on that channel, just individual snippets and cuts. So it's a neat place if you want to go listen to some pretty good music with an okay tuba player. First Federal Jazz Band's on there with you. Yes.
It might have dropped out with who?
With you.
With me.
First Federal Jazz Band, when you came in, I think I have you on 2 songs with that band.
Yeah, that's the occasion. I must have been drunk because I don't remember.
Well, I've got it on video, so I have proof.
Okay. So if anybody wants to contact you, do you give out your email address?
Sure. My email address is my first initial and my last name at Yahoo. DZEILINGER at yahoo.com.
Do you have any CDs or anything for sale?
I don't have any of my music for sale. All the music I have of mine is for free on my YouTube channel.
What else might you know? What else might you want to mention before we get off of here?
Not necessarily a whole much. Maybe the fact that it's really unfortunate that we call this channel Trad Jazz Today because Dixieland has become such a bad word, and I think that's. I understand the reasoning and I understand the problems with it, but for our sake, it was just a reference to location of where the music started. It has nothing to do with politics or color or anything else. And I have people that have actually refused to do these interviews because of the fact that I use the word trad, and they're afraid they don't send that. For those of you who don't know, the term trad jazz actually kind of originated in England in the 1950s with a revivalist movement. And it was a big deal. There was actually fistfights over trad jazz versus rock and rollers at the time, late 50s, early 60s. And they called themselves trad jazz. Well, I used it just as a shortening of traditional jazz. It's shorter, it makes a better logo than saying, America's classic jazz today, or early American jazz today. Simply just, we call it trad jazz today. And what it really is early American pop music.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I like the word Dixieland still. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of a traditionalist. When you get to baseball, I don't like the designated hitter. When I, earlier in my life, I used to be blind, and now I'm visually handicapped. Then you can't say handicap. I'm visually impaired. I don't know.
Visually challenged, Bob.
Challenged. There you go. That's the word now. I think it's all a bunch of baloney as far as I'm concerned. So, but that's.
And I'm not fat. I'm just spatially enhanced.
There you go. Hey, Dan, it's been really nice talking to you. And when do you think this interview might go up on the?
Well, I haven't decided. If I stick to my schedule, it won't go up until late December. However, I'm thinking about dropping it as a special program on a weekend. Because normally I only air things Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays.
Okay, well, it's been great talking to you. And
you too, Bob.
And take it easy. And I hope you get it up on the channel before we're both gone.
You want to rephrase that? Oh.
Okay.
By the way, thank you for including me on your mailing list. And make sure to say hello to all my friends on the Dixieland Jazz mailing list. DA.
I will do that.
All right. You take care, sir.
You bet. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.